Hi, my name is Ashley Hoover, and this is my Action Research Multimedia presentation. So over the next couple of slides, I'm going to talk about my problem statement. So physical education and physical activity is an integral part of my life and frames my philosophy in physical education for two reasons. The first reason is my educational background. Before I attended teacher's education at the University of Brock, I completed a degree in kinesiology at the University of Ottawa. And this is where I really learned the importance of physical literacy and the importance of daily physical activity. Secondly, is my personal experiences. Sports and physical education has really framed who I am today and why I want to become a teacher. So my statement of action research problem is regarding low participation and engagement in physical education classrooms. So what I've observed in my placements is that students are not very engaged in the process of learning. This interest started at the University of Ottawa. I took a course called Interventions in Physical Activity, and we looked at the time that students were spent actively engaged in the process. And we found that students spend 35 to 50% of the time engaged, but the other 50% of the time is spent listening or waiting in line and other things. We also found that the attitudes towards physical education were lower than what we thought. And I kind of took that research and kind of brought it into my practicum experiences and kind of found the same tendencies. Something else that I observed is that in physical education classrooms, most often teachers are using traditional styles. For example, they're teaching how to make a pass in basketball, but they're not giving students the context of the game, so why they are learning that skills. And I just think that teachers could engage students by using games to create context and use questioning to make sure that students are understanding. And this can be supported through the model Teaching Games for Understanding. This model has really framed my question for my action research project. And my question is, how do students respond and participate to the model Teaching Games for Understanding when it's used during instruction of physical education? So some definition and relevant terms. So first, what is Teaching Games for Understanding? So it's a model that's problem-based where skills are taught in game situation and provides students with the opportunity to make decisions. So it's really based in decision making. Participation. So participation in this context is defined as actively engaging in physical activity. So we're not just in the gym. How long and how active are we in that process? Next, games. So games in this context is defined of activity of similar intent. So games are put into three major categories. So we have target games, invasion games, and striking and fielding. The next two are kind of games, terms specific to the Teaching Games for Understanding model. And the first is game appreciation. Game appreciation is really the student's understanding of the game. When we look at this, we're talking about rules, boundaries, scoring schemes, etc. Next is tactical awareness. So understanding of the tactics that make students successful. So when we're talking about tactical awareness, the best example I can give to you is when you think about 10-bit soccer. I see 7 kids on the same ball kind of moving around collectively throughout the field. But a tactic that we could make kids understand that will make them successful in this context would be spreading the field or staying wide. Next is physical literacy. So in education, physical literacy is this word that flies around very often, but we often don't define this term, and I think it's important to understand moving forward. So physical literacy is defined as motivation, confidence, and knowledge to maintain physical activity at an appropriate level throughout a lifetime. So my literature summary began with the Teaching Games for Understanding. And what I really learned from this, and I got this book when we took phys ed, was what it really did was it taught me what teaching games for understanding was about. So kind of the key elements of this model are well-structured games where students are encouraged to make decisions, and we're using questioning to ensure their understanding. Um, and it's what really this does is it elevates game appreciation and tactical awareness. So the next article that I looked at, and it's really my rationale for this action research project, was an article called Teaching Physical Literacy to Promote Healthy Lives, so teaching games for understanding and related approaches. So what this article found was that 90% of students preferred this model. And it heightened interest and engagement in learning, and it gave a higher value in physical education. So I thought, wow, like that's, that already seems like a lot. And then, but they added it increased tactics and game appreciation. So not only are kids enjoying it more, are they engaged more, and they have a higher value in physical education, but they have a better performance in those games. The next article that I looked at, and it kind of struck my attention, was learning informally to use teaching games for understanding, the experience of a recently qualified teacher. So I thought, hey, I'm a new teacher. What does this article have to say? So what it explained was that although this model has proven to be effective, it does present challenges for some teachers. And it's kind of about background knowledge and what they're doing to further their education within this model. What I did to kind of face that is I kind of looked at um, you know, the next two pieces of literature to kind of combat that and to try to educate myself the best that I can to be successful when implementing this model. So the first one that I looked at was Teaching Games for Understanding, so building a physically literate individual. This is really a practical application for teachers that you could pick up and use today in your classroom. What I found is it really created a model kind of for me to follow when I'm thinking about developing a unit using this model. The next one is More Teaching Games for Understanding. And what I really took away from this book was really it laid out a model for teacher planning. So it kind of said, like, at the beginning, we should talk about this, then we move towards this. And it used a questioning chart. So it provides a questioning chart to help you develop your questioning skills. So my research plan, so over the next couple of slides, we're going to discuss the data sources. So the data sources that I have chosen are journals and diaries from students and teachers. So this tool will help provide context for daily lessons and activities. Next is anecdotal records, and I chose this because I wanted to gain insight on student behavior and how they respond to the model. There's a lot of questioning involved in the model, and I think that this would be a good tool to use to record students' responses. Next is attitude and rating scales. So I chose this source to gain insight into students' attitudes, values, and beliefs about physical education and how they feel about implementing the model. So when we talk about triangulation of data, what's important to mention is, are we getting this source throughout time, and is it coming from more than one source? So that's why I think it's important for journals and diaries to be from both the teacher and the student. I think that provides multiple entry points, and anecdotal records and journals are happening throughout, right? So we're not just focusing on the end or the middle; it's all throughout. And finally, the attitudes and rating scales. This would happen at the beginning and at the end to really just give a range from before the model is implemented, all the way through the model with the journals and anecdotal records, and then at the end, kind of how they feel about it. To ensure validity and reliability, when I talk about journals and diaries, I think it's important to define objective. So to plan the unit, and then to find the questions that are most appropriate to ask at those times and what we're really looking for in our research. I think it's also, obviously, it's important to write clear and precise questions. And when we think about education, we have to think about the grade that we're teaching and make sure that it's age appropriate for that level. And I added here, so we have independent source review data and maintain objectivity. I think that would just help when we're looking at qualitative data. It's very easy to not stay objective, right? So if we have a colleague come and look, that will help us maintain some objectivity. And then finally, I added systematic review. So that goes along with anecdotal records as well. We're not just randomly going through. We need to make sure that we look at all the data collected and that it is we're taking into consideration everything equally. For the attitudes and rating scales, my strategy would just be to use previously created surveys. So obviously, if we talk about who, it's students, teachers, the colleague would come in when we're talking about the systematic review of data. So journals and diaries would be in their physical education journals. So I see it as a folder. They write their journal response, put it in the folder. At the end, take it out, staple it together, and hand it in. Anecdotal records, for me personally, I take my anecdotal records on Note on iPad. This kind of just allows me to take pictures and videos of things that I think are important in the classroom. Finally, attitudes and rating scales. I would use a survey, again, that has already been created and used in other research, but I would use Google surveys to implement this. My research plan and data collection. So over the next couple of slides, I'm going to talk about the data collection procedures. So here's just my timeline chart. So this research would take place at the beginning of the year, so approximately around October, and over the course of a physical education unit, so approximately 4 to 6 weeks. I'd use this in the context that they have 2 physical education courses or classes in 1 week and 1 health. When we talk about journals and diaries, again, this would happen throughout. So it would happen from October to approximately December, and it would just reflect the daily activities. The anecdotal records from October to November, and would really just record classroom discussions. Finally, attitude and rating scales. This would take place twice, and it would be before the unit, so in October or at the end of September, and after the unit. So we would look kind of more towards early December, late November. So some ethical considerations. So I think when we're talking about research, I think it's really important to maintain students' confidentiality. I think that Google Surveys is a good tool to use because it allows students to stay anonymous. And I think that this allows students to be more honest in their responses, which is really what you want in research. Also, I think when analyzing journals and students will receive pseudonyms. So if for some reason they use their name or other students' names, you would just black it out and create a pseudonym for them. You could retype their responses as well without that information when you do analyze it or when you have a colleague analyze their responses. In terms of anecdotal records, I don't think it needs to be specific to the students, but general observations. So when you're making observations, you wouldn't say, Johnny said, and then give the example. And if you did, I think that when it came time to analyze that with the third party again, it would be important to take out those names or give those children pseudonyms as mentioned. So designing this action research support my knowledge of teaching because really it allows me to evaluate students' participation. So are students responding well to this model? And if they are, it can help me plan the rest of my year, right? And I think in the rich discussion that you're going to have with students using this model, I think that it allows you to analyze and understand students' interests, which again allows you to plan for the remainder of the year. For me, my biggest learning has been giving me an alternative to traditional teaching styles. And really what this model does is places the student at the center of the learning. So what I think is really important is often as teachers, we revert back to how we were taught. And I was taught so traditionally. So for me, that's comfortable. But this really brings me out and gives me the tools necessary to implement something different. It also provides a model for planning. So as mentioned before, it's easy to revert back to what we know. But when we have a model laid out for us to use, it helps, develop those planning skills and really developing rich games and rich opportunities for student learning. And finally, it develops questioning skills. So as a teacher, a strategy that we talk about a lot in literacy, for example, are cue charts and how to get to those deeper level thinking questions. Well, I think that this is just another way to get to those same questions using kind of a different context. For me, I didn't really think about developing my questioning skills as a teacher in physical education. But I think that this proves that this is something that can be done if implemented well. So thank you for your time. This is the end of my presentation.